Hello friends, this is Ganesh. Hope you're doing great. And in this video, I'm going to explain a small process called context in the Web Dynpro component. So context, a simple way of understanding us. I have a data medium. It can be a variable, work area, or internal table. So whatever you're doing, you need, at least at the end, you need a data medium to hold the business data. And that data medium is going to be represented as an input component. Could be a table, or could be an input box, or a checkbox, option bar, whatever it is. So the communication to be happen between my data medium and the input component. So for this, I'm not able to do a direct communication between these two. So I need some middle layer. That middle layer is called context. So context receives the value from the data medium, could be anything, any format, and that needs to be applied to the input component. Example, if it is an internal table, obviously it could be a table format in the input component. If it is a variable, yes, it could be anything like input box or checkbox or whichever is applicable to hold a single value. That kind of input component is going to be hold this value. So the context plays a middle layer between the data medium and the input component. And context has its own properties. Like context can be created with the help of with the kind of node or directly with the attribute. So attribute is nothing but I want some values to be hold, single values to be hold. So you can go with attribute directly. Or I need a collection of attributes. So we can create a node. Under the node, you can have attributes. You can have a deep nodes also. Depends on the requirement, you can have it. So I have a node, I have a subnode, I have subnode 2, and each subnode has its own attributes. So everything depends on the requirement. So the context is going to be the middle layer between the data medium and the input components. And context can be declared anywhere. Okay, it's not anywhere, wherever is applicable, because there are some places, designated places from the Web Dynpro component where you're able to create the context. Depends on the place that can be act as a global, meaning those contexts can be accessed throughout the Web Dynpro component, or those contexts can be used only within the particular area. Okay, so these are the very basic idea of context. So let's get into the slides first to understand a little more about context, then we'll go to the system. Okay, here. So context, it's going to be a communication layer between your Web Dynpro application or a Web Dynpro component, and the source for the context is always a data medium. The same thing, excuse me. So context can be accessed anywhere in your Web Dynpro component, but the base idea is the context to be declared as a global level. So here I have a context can be declared in a component controller level. So if the context is declared in the component controller level, then that can be accessed throughout your Web Dynpro component. So we have multiple views or multiple windows, wherever is required, you are able to access it. The same context is created in a particular view, then the scope of the context is within the view only. Okay, even you have multiple views, you are not able to use those contexts outside of the view which is got created. Same thing for window also. If you create a context in a window, yes, it can be accessed only in the window. So this is basic idea of context. So context, well, two things we have. Under the context can be created directly with attributes or node and attributes. So mostly for a table, we go with nodes. It's a collection of attributes. Or it's a single value, we prefer to go with attributes. So this picture shows under the context, I have two different attributes. It has its own properties. What is the data type? What is the size? And those things are coming under the same. If you create attribute, you will get a window. in the properties window, you can able to manage what kind of properties you want for this attribute. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to learn how to read the context attribute. Obviously, read and write. So if it is a variable, it needs to be read and write, right? So here it's called, technically we call it as attribute. So Web Dynpro component is it's filled with full of object-oriented concepts, so class and methods. So any single process or action to be done with the object variable or object reference variable or and with the help of a method. Okay, so you need one object reference variable. Obviously, you need a method to initiate that object reference, as well as you need a method to perform some action. So I want to read, or I want to assign a value to the attribute. So for everything you need a methods. So make sure you are good with those things, like you know how to create very simple basic idea of object oriented. So then the writing a code in the Web Dynpro component is pretty simple. So now we are going to learn, or we are going to know the steps and what are the methods is required to read and write the value to the attribute. The source of this attribute is a variable or just a data medium. Maybe it's a local from my Web Intro component. So where I want to write the code. So here, same like the last video I have mentioned, there are a lot of places to write the code. Again, it's a Web Dynpro is nothing but the Dynpro concept. So Dynpro like PBO, PI, same concept over here. So where you want to write it. So before the screen pop-up, after the screen pop-up, or after any action triggered. So only limited places where you can write the code, but you have different methods like going out of the view, coming out of the view. So different methods are available. So you can pick it, depends on your business requirement. So the first thing is always you need an object reference variable, and that needs to be referred by if WD context attribute. So here we are going to see how to read and write the value for the attribute. Make sure I don't have a node. I have a direct attribute under the context. So this is the interface. Pretty much we are going to use it whenever you want to deal with attributes. Okay. So if WD context attribute, just make sure you create, means you declare one object variable with the help of type ref2 syntax. And then I need to get the element, like I need to get the, or I would instantiate the particular object reference variable. So for that I'm going to use a get element method. So that is going to get the control of your attributes. Okay, so get element just to get the reference of the attributes. So after you get the control of the particular attributes, then you can able to say set attribute and what is the value you want to set. Okay, so and then you want to get the value from the attribute, you have to say get attribute. So we have some parameters needs to be passed, so that we'll see while having in the system, but it's very generic idea. What are the methods we need used to read and write the value to the context attribute? Okay, so the next one is, okay, so now this is a context which has a node. So read and write the context node. So under the node, I have an attribute. That's what I'm saying. So node is a collection of attributes. So if you need a sub node, yes, you can create your own sub nodes. So here what I'm going to do is my internal table. Consider this is my internal table source. So from the internal table, I'm going to pass the value to the nodes, not to the attributes one by one. So node can have a number of attributes. So now the communication is happening between my internal table to the nodes directly, and then nodes to my input component. Could be a table. Okay. So here the process is how to read and write to the context node, not to the attribute, not to the node attributes directly. Just fill the node, it automatically fill your attributes also. Make sure the structures are same. Okay. So here for this also I need an object reference. So for every process I'm going to create an object reference. That's what I'm always saying, you need one object reference of one. Okay. So here the object reference is going to refer a different interface, context node. Previous one refers context attribute. This is context node. And same thing, you have to get the reference with the help of another method called get child node. So I have to give the value. So this is why I'm saying every method has its own mandatory parameters. We'll see while writing the code. Okay. So using get child node, get the reference for your object reference variable. And once you get the control of the child node, then you can able to use a method called bind table. It's not set attribute, get attribute. It's a different method called bind table because we are going to deal with the node directly, not with the attributes. So bind table will transfer or allow to transfer the value between your internal table to your context node. Okay. And the reverse way, suppose I want to read the value from the table. So maybe we can give editable format, table format, so user able to enter it. So I want to read the user input values from a table component, right? So for that, the same reverse way. So what is this, a table component, and go to nodes and nodes to your internal table. So for that, again, you need the same thing. You need a reference for the same if wd context node, get child node, get the control of your node, and then there's a method called get static attributes table, which transfer the values from the nodes to our internal table. So whatever is changed or modified through this component, that is going to hold in the nodes, that can be read using get static attributes table. Okay, so this is about the node. So the next one is, yeah, how to read and write the context node attribute. So we know how to read the attribute directly, context attribute. Now it's a one more layer, node attribute. So what I have to do is very simple, just a assumption. You have to get the reference of this node as well as the attribute. So we know how to get the value directly from the attribute, not the node, right? Now we have the attribute is inside the node. So get the reference of the node, then everything is set. So now the code is like this. So we need object reference for the node now because we need to get the reference, and then get the reference of the get child node using this get child node method. So once it is done, and you need one more object reference for element, because so far we have communicated directly to the node and then attribute. Okay, sorry, separately. So now we have to get the reference of node as well as attribute. So you need a two object reference, one for node, one for element. And once this element is done, once you have this reference, then you have to say get attribute method to get the value of the attribute which is inside the node. And I'm sorry. Okay, set is different one once again. And set attribute is going to be set the value to the attribute. Okay, so here sometimes what happens, the same attribute can be mapped with the input field also. It's not always the node is mapped with the table. Sometimes this material can be mapped with some other input component. If that is the case, we need this concept to read the value of the attributes one by one. Okay. So this is get attribute, and probably the next one is for set attribute. Same code, yeah. Set attribute is a method which is going to be set the value for the attribute which is inside the node. Anything else? No, nothing. Okay, so hope you have an idea about the context and how to handle or how to this basic process, read and write the value between a different context property, attribute or a node. Let's see the entire thing in the code now, the system now. Yeah, this is my system, and as this is just second video of Web Dynpro, I'm showing again how to create a Web Dynpro component. So going forward, probably I skipped the step. I don't want to waste your time more. So here I'm going to go to the SE80 and pick this option, Web Dynpro component or interface, and give the name, whatever names you require, CGI web context. Okay, so it shows this component is not available. Do you want to create? Set yes. It'll ask what is the description, what is the window name and view name. So maybe window name you can create, if you want you can change it. So window 1, creates, save it. So it's done. Okay, so this is the just a view of your entire Web Dynpro component with its own default options like the component controller, component interface, views and windows, application yet to be created. application, nothing but a kind of a transaction code. Okay. So now you have the options where and all you can create a context. Under the component controller, you can create, and under the view, you can create. 1 minute. Okay. Under the view, you're able to create context, and under the window, you're able to create. So wherever you are able to see the context tab, yes, you are able to create, or you can able to handle or deal with context. So you can have one more over here as well. Interface controller also, you have the context. Okay. So do you have an interface view? No. Okay, only in the interface controller. Let's see but little detail about these things quite later. So now if you create a control context under the component controller, this can be accessed in a view or in a window also. So how to create it? Make sure you're in a change mode. Yeah, in change mode. So right click, create, using wizard also. If you want, you can go ahead with that, like attributes from components of a structure or different context, you're able to do it. But initially we go with a very simple option, node or attribute manually. So if you can use node or attribute. Okay, so I'll start with attribute. So here attribute, it will come with some window and basic properties you have to give. So this is my attribute. So ATTT attribute for MATN. Okay, so type MATN data element you have to give, and there are some options like read only yes or no. So it can be only read, it can be updated. So those things you just play around with, very simple one. Okay, input mode yes default, or you can say I don't want any input mode, or if you want the dictionary search help, then it will ask what is the search help you want. Okay, so very basic things about creating an attribute. So mostly it's relevant to the input component level. Okay, so now I'm going with automatic. Okay, so it takes from the data element s underscore mat1. Just click continue. Additional attribute I didn't do now, and then it's done. So context directly have attribute. So once you have attribute, you can do the same for creating more than one. And once you have an attribute, or once you have the context in the component controller, if you go to the view, just save it. Go to your context, and here it's visible here. Okay, and go to the window, context. Yes. Okay. So here, one restriction, always remember, you are creating a context that needs to be used or shared down the line of your Web Dynpro component. Make sure you have created using a node. That is a minimum requirement. Okay. Only if you want to share. Okay. So like just drag and drop. So it shows mapping for root node context not possible, meaning even though if this is going to be used for the input field, it's not a table. Why I want to create a node? Yes, you have to create a node. Even though if it is just an attribute and is used for the input component, make sure that is under any of the node. Okay, so very simple. Only the node can be mapped, not the attribute. So now I'm going to create an attribute inside the node. So right click, create node. So the node is for input field, some names. Okay, interface node. I'm not going to change anything here. So dictionary structure, it's like based on the structure, I want to create some values. I want to add it. You can do it. Okay, or manually also you can create it. These are the cardinalities. So cardinalities is 1 to 1 is fine for attributes. Suppose if it is a table, obviously you have 0 to 1 or 0 to n or 1 to n. You have to make sure. Okay, so we're not going to see much on it, but if you have time, just play around with this. Okay, you will get sometimes you'll get a dump if you violate this cardinality through programmatically, then you'll get a dump. Okay, saying that the cardinality is violated. So now either you can give the structure or simply create a node. So here node has been created. So right click. So if you used a BAP dictionary, it will list at least all the fields. You can select what are the fields you need under this node. Otherwise, go with create. Yeah, 1 second. Right click, create. attribute. So same kind of window, just give an attribute name, att1. Okay, I'll go with that, att same matnr, type as matnr. So read only, no. So automatics, everything. I'm not going to add anything here. Just continue. So right click, create attribute for maktx. Okay. So now if you go to view, so save, yes, I want to save the changes here. 1 minute. So go to context. So now you're able to see the node. So now if you drag and drop, it works. Okay. And you are able to see a small arrow mark. It denotes this is not the source of your view. This is actually mapped from a component controller. So that is the identification. So here you have only plus, but here you have plus and arrow. So just to expand, you have the things. Okay. So now this is the way you're going to map the context node or attributes from the component controller. And if you want to create your own, you can create it here. So right click, same create node and attribute, or create using the wizard. So now we are going to, once it comes to this view, once you mapped it, it's same like act as your normal context view, or it's a component controller, whatever it is, it's a context for view now. So now we are going to have, we are going to add some values and read the values from the context. So whatever you want to do with the context, obviously you need object reference as well as some methods. So now I'm going to map this with my input, some input component, because I need to see how the values are reflected instead of seeing in the debugging mode. So go to layout, have one input field for this, insert element, input one input field, and it will come down. Just do the binding over here, value. So it displays here. Once you mapped it, it displays here. This here it displays only the view level, not the component controller level. Okay. So I want this to be mapped. And if you noticed, this is an input field, it's a component. So I'm not able to map it, or I'm not able to bind the node. So it depends on the input component. This also adjusts. So if it is a table, yes, I'm able to map it with the node level, not in the attribute level. Okay. So here they mention very clearly, it's not a compatible with context element. So only attribute is, and even you can see this is enabled and this is disabled mode. Okay. So it depends on the component, it adjusts. That's actually good. Yeah, it's done. So now inside the method init, like PBO, before the application begins, I want to write some code over here. So a few things to be noticed. So few object reference are already in your it's declared, I can say, from the default level. So from the standard, you have few attributes. We are going to use this more, like WD context, WD this, WD comp controller, that is coming under attributes. So this is available everywhere. So here also depends on the place, it might vary. The default parameter, default attributes might vary. So if you go to Windows, go to attributes, you can see. Okay. So now I'm going to use this one. Attributes. I'm going to use this WD context more for my requirement. So go to WDINIT, so like PBO. Okay, so here, actually I have explained node and then attribute in the code level. Okay, so the structure is node and attribute. So we're going in the second step first. Okay. So I thought I'm going to explain set attribute, get attribute without the node, and then node for the table. That's fine. We'll go a different way here. So this is my structure. I have a node and then attribute. So I need an object for this. and I need an object for this, means object reference, okay, and the corresponding methods. And to get the node, so I can say get child node, and here to get the reference I need to get element. That's it. So these are the two elements which we are going to use it. So let's have the variables first. Data object for node type ref2 if wd context node, and I need an object for attribute type ref2 if wd context element. Okay, simple. So now I need a reference. Just a attribute, sorry, just a variable is ready, object variable. So I need a reference of it. So let's get the reference for the node first. And here I'm going to use the WD context object reference, which is the default one, which is already available in the attributes tab for this particular view. And here I'm going to get child node. Okay, and within bracket single quotes, what is the node name? Context in underscore fields. Okay, it's in capital, so in underscore fields. Okay, so I got the reference for the node. Then I need a reference for my attribute, so using the previous object reference, the node object reference, and for this I'm going to use get element. That's it. So here the reference I have received it. So once you get the reference, it's always remember, once you get the reference of a node or once you get the reference of the attribute, it's very easy to read and write over the node or over to the attribute. Okay, so now these are the very basic steps. So once it is ready, I'm going to play around with the get attribute or set attribute. Okay, so here I just know the names, just do it. Or if you want to go with the pretty or not pretty, the pattern and give what is the object reference class and things, you can do it. Okay, so here I'm going to set the values for this. So object attribute, there is a method called set attribute. Okay, so okay, let me do one thing. Let me go with F6. So it's for maybe for the first time to understand the import and export parameter of that. So I need object attribute, and this is going to be if wd context element and set star f4 set attribute. So it's quite easy for maybe the new people for the object-oriented concept. So here two things you got to pass, name and value. So what is the name of your attribute? So my name of my attribute is matn. Attribute name, you just check it. I'm sorry, in the context. Oh, sorry, att underscore matn. So here it is att underscore matn. What is the value? Here you can fill the value from any of the source, but here I'm going with hard coded material1. Material1. Okay, so anything else I have is deleted. Okay, so at least the first step, let's see how it behaves. Just activate it. So this is the first time, so make sure you're activating all the relevant component of your Web Dynpro. Otherwise, always right click in the component level and activate it. Make sure the current screen is also active. So it's very simple, and create an application and execute it. It's an application, save it, local object. Yes, it's ready, and execute. So here you go. So material1. Got it? So this is a way to just have a set attribute. So the remaining is quite simple. So I'm going a little fast. So you want to get attribute, the same thing. Suppose you want to read it. So read the value and map to the other one. So what I can do is I want to read it, right? Control F6. So here I'm going to use get. So the get element is only one. These two are one-time activity. So get the reference of your node and then element or attribute is one-time activity. After that you can play around. So get attribute. So what is the name? So name is att and I need a variable. So on the flow means I'm just declaring over here. It's not the right way. You got to declare always in the top. Just for a quick workaround. So here I'm going to receive the values here. So LV okay. So maybe you can again map this to another context attribute or another input component. But here I'm going with debugging mode. This is quite 1 second. I'm sorry, orchid itself. Yeah, I'm going to keep a breakpoint. Okay, it's like external breakpoint. So let's see how it behaves. So go here, refresh. So I'm expecting this to be read. So right, mat4. Okay, F5. I'm sorry, not mat4 is going to read because I'm an init method. So let's see, matnr F6 material 1 because it's not material 4 because I init method. Otherwise what you have to do is get attribute, write it in an action, like have a button, just click, same code you have to write it over there, but again you have to do the declaration because this object references the local declaration. So do the declaration and use the get attribute, obviously we'll get it. Okay, clear? So now what I'm going to do is attribute is done. We'll go with the node. So how we can read the or how we can communicate with the nodes. So here we can see about how it's attributes. Suppose if you want to see only attribute level, these two lines are not required. Okay, so directly you can write only for the node. Maybe quickly I can show that also. Go to the context. So let me have a local attribute, create attribute, attribute mtart, material type mtart. Okay, so this is the attribute which is not part of the node. Okay, so now I'm going to have one input field for a material type and then just add the value directly. So right click, insert element, input to, input field, then map it. Okay, mtart, then go to method. So I don't want to disturb this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again with the different names. Okay, so it's not required, but for easy reference, I'm doing it. So data object for local attribute type ref2 if wd context element. So I'm not going to create anything for node because it's not required. Okay, then this needs to be local attribute equals wd context get element, and so now I got the reference, so I can do whatever is required. Set attribute I always go with pattern. because importing, exporting, everything I had to do. So this is local attribute, and I want to set. Okay. So attribute name is attmtart, and finished one fert. Okay. Activate. So now come here, refresh. So it's automatically comes. So the idea is, if it is an attribute, just create an object reference only for the attribute and get the reference of the attribute and use get or set for read and write. Okay. So now we are going to do a communication with node level. Okay. So let me have a button and let me have a table and fill it. So right click, let me have a button over here. A little faster, yeah, button, and come down, fill the properties, text, get data, then action to be created, get data. I'm not filling the descriptions and all, those are very basic, so you can do it. Okay, will it enabled? Yeah, it's enabled now. So action is ready. So let me have a table, because anyway node is ready for me, right? So let me create a table. Right click, insert elements, T1, table. Okay, so the table, it's empty table. I need to create a binding. Based on your binding, it automatically creates the number of columns. So right click, create binding. It shows contacts. Oh, here is it shows only the nodes. It's like I'm trying to add here. You can see these are disabled, these are only enabled. So based on the input component, it automatically determine which is applicable to map it. So if I try to double click the attribute, it shows so contact element is not suitable for binding. So for table binding, always in the node level. So now remember the cardinality whenever you do for a binding. My cardinality is 1:1 for this node. Okay, so if I violate the rule in the code, you will get a dump. We'll see that as well. Continue. So my binding is ready. It shows only two fields. Depends on it. It shows only two fields, and you can able to set what is the minimum number of fields. Sorry, number of records to be displayed. Everything you can able to set in the table properties. Okay. So you have a header and you have this column. If you want to change, you can change as well. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a code in the action. I'm going to fill the node. So forget about the input, because we are not directly communicate with the input component. Everything to the context, and the context is bind with the input component that reflects. Okay. So I'm going to write the code for the context node now, that is coming under get data. So here I don't want to anything with attributes. I'm going to communicate only with the node. So I need only one object reference, that is for node type ref2 if wd context node, and get the reference, then play around, wd context, get child node and the node name. So node name is input fields, right? Input is case sensitive. Let me cross check. Yes, in underscore fields. Yeah, that is the one. In underscore fields. So now I'm going to fill the details. So first let me have that ready. So you can have your work area or internal table, because you need a source data medium initially to fill it, and finally we are going to map it using some methods, standard methods. Okay, so create a work area or internal table with the same way, or you have an option. So here work area for Mara, so type wd this context, element context. So you can over here, okay, so here you can see if it is, you want an element context or elements context. Okay, so element context, you have only one. It comes as a tooltip. Okay, here, come on. Okay, so here you can see element in fields, whatever you want, and you can see element context. So here it's a table type. It's mentioned very clearly. It's a table type, and here it's a structure type, and this is fields. Okay, so structure type, it's a fields, and this one is a table type, and this one is again as a table type. So here I want to go with the structure because I feel it's a cardinality is only one, so I go with the work area. So structure, element, context. So this way you can able to declare your work area or body of internal table, or normal way also you can declare it. So the structure types, begin of structure name, field 1, field 2, field 3, and do it. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is WA Mara. I'm hard code. Okay, now it's hard coding. Maybe I can go with select MATNR. So this has only two, right? MAKTX from MAKT into WA Mara. So I go with single. Okay, so I have the data. It's my data source. So here data source is work area. So now I'm going to bind it. Okay, 1 minute. So bind is always a table. So you need a table for this. IT Mara type WD this. So I need a table type. So this is a table type, right? Element context is a table type. Yes. Dot. So here, okay, why I'm doing this? Okay, anyway, it's a single. Either way, you can append or you can change this and use up to 1 rows. So this is not relevant to Web Dynpro. So how you are filling it, it depends on your need. So just a Mara. Okay, so now I'm going to bind this table. So bind table, better I go with pattern. So this is my node, and this is coming from my node interface, and this is going to be bind table. Yes, enter. So here you have to give what is the new items. Like it has only one, right? So new items is ITMBR. That's it. So I'm not going to use these things now. Okay. So either way you can use this, or anyway it has only one exporting parameter. You can use like this object node bind table of ITMER. So both works. Okay. So let me comment this. Actword. That's an error. Fewer fields than selected. So it has only one. Okay, yeah, it's my mistake. Let me see what is inside it. Okay, just double click. It shows I have picked the wrong structure. So empty ART, it has only one. Okay, it's my mistake. Sorry for that. So here again, control space bar, element context. Okay, this is only one. I didn't notice that. So I need this one, element in fields, because it has two, MATNR, MAKTX. So here you have two things. So I want this. Okay, so here also same thing to be added. Control space bar. Okay, this is structure. If it is structure, just change to type table of, or pick the table type. This is a table type. Okay, done. Check, activate. Okay, done, and it's active. Let's see how it behaves. Okay, so go here, refresh. Oh, I have a breakpoint. Okay, just execute. So here, get data. So it shows the only one record. So why this is getting changed? The structure, the node attribute is mapped with your input field also. That's what whenever there is a that particular context attribute is updating, it's just updated wherever it's mapped, whichever input component it's mapped. If I press F5, you can see. Okay, come on. Right, so material one, it's in the init method, it's updated the input component input field as well as your table also. It doesn't matter because it is mapped with any input component, it's updated. And if I click get data, this context attribute is getting updated through another method and it reflects wherever it had been mapped or binded. Okay, so now I'm trying to add one more record. Let's see what happens, and if it is any error, we'll change the cardinality. Select MATNR into table ITMARA. So maybe I'll go with few records up to 10 rows. Okay, activate. Refresh. Why is coming and stops? Here I resaved it. Okay, get data. It's error because it violates the cardinality. It's mentioned very clearly. So the component controller, that is the field, that's a node, it violates the cardinality. My cardinality is 1:1. So what I had to do was you have to change it. So the changes to be happened where it got created. So not here. So if you double click the node, you can see the properties. So here cardinality they mention it's only 1:1. Okay, so this cannot be changed here because here we just mapped it. It's not a source. So go to the source, double click the node. These are very basic mistakes which we do in the initial times, and change the cardinality from 0 to 1, sorry, say 1 to 1 to 0 to 10, depends on your need. Save it and activate it. Refresh. Right. Okay, so beginner's mistake. Okay, so what happened is I have a node, I have an attribute. The node is mapped with my table, and the node attribute is mapped with my one of my input component. It's not a table, right? So that input component accepts only one value. So this is a point. If you're mapping an attribute, node attribute, not a direct attribute, node attribute to any one of your input component rather than your table, make sure the cardinality is 1:2, either 1 or n, that depends, but the cardinality begins with 1. So that is the basic rule. If you map any node attribute to the input component, okay, apart from the table. So normally we use map the attribute. So attribute is always go with 1:1. So that is the reason. You remember, right? I mapped the one field, node attribute field, for the input component also, input field also. So that is the reason. So I had to do again the changes over here to 1:n cardinality, act toward it. So if it is not mapped with any input field, we are good. 0 to n is fine with the node. So now go here, F5, yeah, it works better, and click get data. So you will get the information. Clear? So hope you will get some idea about context and how to create global level contexts, local, node, attribute, and how to play around with the node and attribute. So with some default methods. Okay, so always try to read and write the data to the context, and depends on the binding, it automatically reflects your input field. So that is always easy to understand. Okay, so handle how to handle the context. It could be attribute or a node, automatically it will reflect in your input components. So hope this video might be useful for you. Just go through it. If you have any doubts, please let me know. And thank you so much for your time. See you in the next video. Bye.